Assalamu alaikum and warm welcome everyone. I am Dr. Asim Ejaz, Consultant Emergency Medicine and Vice President of BIPEPA, the British and Irish Pakistani Emergency Physician Association. Thank you all for joining us for our first webinar. It is wonderful to see colleagues from emergency medicine and other specialties. Before we start, just a few words about BIPEPA. BIPEPA was established to bring together Pakistan emergency medicine professionals working across UK and Ireland. Our vision is simple: to support colleagues through education, mentorship, professional development, networking, and collaboration. So this webinar marks the start of our monthly educational program. Many of our sessions will focus on non-clinical topics that are highly relevant to the doctors, including leadership, communication skills, governance, medico-legal issues, portfolio pathway and career progression, well-being, financial planning, and interview preparation. And alongside these, we also plan to include some selected clinical topics and updates. I would like to introduce our moderator for this evening, Dr. Imad Qureshi, who was the General Secretary of BIPEPA. I would like to thank Dr. Imad and all the BIPEPA team for organizing this webinar, and there will be monthly webinar for next in the future. So over to you, Imad.
Thank you, Dr. Asim. So everybody, my name is Imad. I'm an emergency medicine consultant working on the Isle of Wight. And as Asim Bhai said, I'm BIPEPA's General Secretary. And as he's already introduced the webinar series, we will be hosting these webinars. They will be on the first Thursday of every month. And we will keep sharing those invites and those registration links in the future going forward. To start today's webinar, the topic for today is financial independence, financial understanding, and also in particular knowing your NHS pension. We're very fortunate that we have Mr. Andrew Godfrey here, who is a independent financial advisor, works with Quilter Financial Advice Services, and he's qualified and competent in giving us information, giving us advice, and we're very thankful that he has participated and is here with us today. It's great that we have over 90 registrations for today, and as people keep rolling in, we will keep letting everybody in. The session itself is being recorded as well, and it will be hosted on BIPEPA's Facebook and LinkedIn pages. Please feel free to ask any questions that you have by putting them in the chat box, but keep yourselves muted at all times. If any of your questions are generic questions that can be beneficial to more than one person, we will post those questions to Andrew at the end of his presentation. Also, Andrew and Jonathan have agreed that they will offer a free financial consultation session of up to 30 minutes to all the attendees. And Jonathan will be sharing his email address and telephone number at the end. So even if you did not consent in your registration to have your contact details shared with Jonathan, his contact details will be shared with all of you. I will let you know when that slide comes on in case people want to take screenshots or make a note of those details. With that, I won't keep you away from Andrew's expertise any longer, and we will let the session start. Andrew, if you'd like to share your screen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Imad, and thank you very much, Dr. Asim. So my name is Andrew Godfrey. I'm going to try and clear up some of the murk in the NHS pension pond for you today. So let me just share my screen. Let's start the slideshow. So I'm going to look at some basic fundamentals of the NHS pension scheme, and I'm going to look at the area that seems to be misunderstood the most, which is tax and McCloud. So NHS pension is actually an absolutely fantastic benefit for the doctors. It is many, many times better than anything that's available outside the NHS. And the only reason that it is so good and so generous is because it's backed by the government, because obviously the NHS is such an important body and the work you do is so important. But trust me, anybody outside the NHS is looking in on NHS pensions and would very much like to be in the club, but they're not. So NHS pensions, the employer value is exceptional because the employer is the government. Pretty much no private company now could back a scheme as generous as the NHS pension scheme. The NHS employer contribution rate is actually nearly a quarter of your pensionable pay. And what this does is it funds a defined benefit pension, which means you're not like somebody in a personal pension scheme where that's called a defined contribution scheme, and you put money into the pension and it's invested and hopefully it goes up. Sometimes it goes down and you end up with whatever happens with that particular investment. In contrast, in the NHS, it's a defined benefit, which is just a formula giving you an actual amount at the end, which is not open to the vagaries of the stock market. It's dependent on your final pensionable pay or your actual pensionable earnings. So for that reason, it's guaranteed, whereas a normal personal pension isn't. It's also inflation-linked income for life, and it gives very good survivor and ill health benefits. Most private sector employers contribute far less into their defined contribution schemes, which give far less generous pensions with no guarantees and depends entirely on investment performance. The actual comparison is, in a typical private pension, the employer would be paying in between 3 and 6% into an investment pot with no guarantees. If you had an exceptionally generous private employer, they might stretch to something like 8 to 10%, which is still less than half the NHS level of funding. And the auto enrolment minimum, the legal baseline for an employer to contribute, is only 3%. So NHS employer funding is typically 3 to 8 times higher than elsewhere. What this means is, for every pound you earn, NHS contributes almost 24 pence towards a guaranteed inflation-linked pension. Most private employers contribute between 3 pence and 6 pence, and it only buys an investment pot, not a guaranteed income. So, NHS pension has been shown to be exceptionally good. Royal London Insurance Company did a major analysis of it several years ago, and it was shown to be about 9 times more generous than a non-NHS personal pension. You have guaranteed security. because it's inflation-linked income for life. Exceptional value, 9 times better than a comparable personal pension. Very high employer support, as I've just mentioned, and very hard to replicate privately. To match NHS benefits with a personal pension, you would need vastly higher contributions, and you are still facing investment risk, whereas it's just a formula based on your pay in your pension scheme. So the paradox comes from, we've just explained all these fabulous benefits and the construction of the NHS pension scheme, but surprisingly, between 15 and 20% of NHS doctors have left the NHS pension scheme in recent years. So everybody outside the NHS pension scheme would kill to get in, but nearly 1 in 5 NHS doctors don't seem to appreciate just how good it is, which can only be due to a misunderstanding. So let's try and clear up some misunderstandings. We'll look first at the major document that you get from the NHS regarding your pension. So this is a total reward statement, an actual live one, which I've redacted. So a lot of you will be in multiple schemes. So the more senior, older members may well have considerable benefits in the 95 section. So the 95 section usually comes at the front of your total reward statement. So this particular person joined the pension scheme in 1996. And you will always see a 95 section only updated to 2022. And that's because in 2022, everybody was moved over to the new 2015 scheme. The normal pension age in the 95 section is 60 years, which, given that mortality now is 85 years, that's very good in comparison to most other pension schemes. And this particular person's pay was 148,000. So the way that it works out is, in this 95 scheme, for each year of service, you get 1/80th of whatever your final pensionable pay is at that time. So in this particular year, he's earned 1/80th of 148,000. And his total benefits are multiplied by his membership service. So it's 1/80th of 148,000 multiplied by 33.5 years, because he's been in from 1996 to 22. And what that results in is an annual amount, which we call an annuity, of 62,000. And in the 95 scheme, for every pound you earn as an annuity, you get £3 as a lump sum. So 362s, he's got 186,000 available to him as a lump sum. Now, the lump sum, you can actually increase the lump sum, and the way you increase it is by reducing your annuity. So you can swap some of your annuity money and increase this lump sum money. The maximum amount of lump sum that anybody can take tax-free is 268,000. But if you want to accept the tax for anything over the 268,000, you can actually get a maximum lump sum, not all of which is tax-free, which works out at about 5 times whatever the annuity is. So 5.5 times. So 5.5 times 62 in this instance would actually give him an available lump sum of 1/3 But remember what I said, that's an available lump sum. It's not an available tax-free lump sum. The tax-free element of it is 268,000. But if he wanted to take this 332, he would have to pay tax at his highest rate on the excess over 268,000. So frankly, whenever I do a report for an NHS pension for a doctor, nobody ever takes over 268. But this was just to illustrate what is available as a lump sum. And we can see that by increasing this lump sum from 186 to 332, so that's about 150,000, what he has had to do is, for every £12 extra that you get for your lump sum, you have to have your annual money reduced by £1. So he's got 150,000 extra lump sum, and he's paid for it by having his annual money reduced from 62 to 49. And every doctor that I've ever dealt with always wants the maximum tax-free lump sum, which is, I repeat, 268,000. So that's the 95 section. The doctor is also in the 2015 scheme, as everybody is who's working now. And you can see that he joined it in 2022, which is when all the other schemes, the 95 and the 2008, ceased taking any more contributions. The value is still there, but you can't actually add your personal contributions into those schemes anymore. It's only the 2015 scheme. So he's been in it since 2022, and this particular total reward statement's a little bit out of date. It goes up to 24. So he's only accrued 2 years worth of pension benefits in the 2015 scheme. But in those 2 years at this high rate, he's already amassed an annuity benefit of £4,800. The lump sum is not a feature of the 2015 scheme, so you don't get any automatic lump sum in contrast to what was available in the 95 scheme. And we can see that what he has done again is he's traded some of his annual money for a lump sum. So he wants the maximum lump sum that he can get in this particular scheme. And if you remember, in the 95 scheme, it was 5.5 times whatever the standard pension is. In the 2015 scheme, it works out at about 4.5 times. So the maximum lump sum can be increased from 0, which it is automatically, to 4.5 times this amount, which gives him 20,000. And in order to pay for that, he agrees that his annual money drops from 4,800 to 3,100. And I'll just go back to the previous slide because there was one point that I forgot to make. This term, hypothetical annuity cost, what does that mean? What that actually means is, if I went to a pension company tomorrow and I said, my friend Imad has got a pension of 62,000 each year and a lump sum of 186, I would like to buy a pension contract off you to match that. Can I do that? They would say, yes, Mr. Godfrey, we'll give you those benefits if you give us £1,560,000. So that is the actual open market value of this doctor's pension. And this is just part of his pension. This is just the 95 section. The value is over £1.5 million. And in the 2015 scheme, similar value is £89,000. So all told, he's got £1 2/3 million market value. Or another way of looking at it is, if he wasn't in the NHS pension scheme and he was in a private pension with an investment pot, that pot would need to be £1 2/3 million in order to provide those benefits. I mentioned that there are also excellent ancillary benefits, and the death benefit is double whatever your final pensionable pay is. So the death benefit for this guy on 148 is 297. And we can see here that the employee annual contribution is 20,000. Now, if you remember, this particular person has been employed for 33 years. So he wasn't paying 20,000 when he started in 1996. So my guess is that the average annual contribution that he's made is something like 7,000 or 8,000 over those 33 years, which would give about $250,000 he's paid in. And what he's got is this benefit of $1.5 million in the 95 and another 89,000 in the 2015. So he's paid in $250,000 and he's got $1 2/3 millions. So new retirement flexibilities. Until 2023, there was a significant negative to claiming your 95 benefits, and that was that you weren't allowed to continue to pay in to the NHS pension scheme. So I had several doctors who I did pension reports for that year, and they wanted their 95 benefits. They got their 95 benefits. They continued working in the NHS. They really wanted to continue paying into the pension scheme because, as I've just explained, it is a thing of beauty, but they weren't allowed to, which was a ridiculous situation. And the government changed it in 2023. So now you can have the best of both worlds. You can access some of your pension and continue to work in the NHS pension, in the NHS, and contribute to the NHS pension scheme. But that wasn't available until 2023, but it is now. And it doesn't involve any change in your job contract. Things can just be completely seamless. The only thing that is required to qualify for it is it must be accompanied by a minimum 10% cut in pensionable pay, which only lasts for 12 months. It's a silly rule, but the government required it because normally when a pension member claims their pension benefits, they do it at the point of complete retirement when they've stopped working. So they said that it was too generous to allow doctors to claim their pension benefits in full and accrue further pension benefits in full. And there had to be some sort of penalty for this wonderful gesture that they'd made. And the penalty was you have to have your pay cut for 12 months to the tune of 10%. But remember, it's pensionable pay. It doesn't actually mean you have to have your entire pay cut. And on the NHS employers website, it shows that the recommended way of doing it is not to just drop one PA. You could carry on with 10 PAs, but instead of 10 PAs being linked to your pension account and contributing to your pension account, they set up a separate pension account just for 1 year. So 9 of your PAs, for instance, would be linked to a pension contribution, and 1 of your PAs, which you continue to still work, would not be linked to a pension contribution. And that's the way that employers recommend that the 10% cut in pensionable pay is done. And my experience is that literally about 50% of NHS trusts allow this, and this is the way it happens, and 50% either aren't set up to do it or don't have the facilities to do it for some reason, and they don't allow it, in which case you would have to drop 1 PA and take an actual 10% income cut, but only for 12 months. So moving on, let's go to the annual allowance and clear up some misconceptions about it, because this is the area where doctors get really confused and quite scared when they get their brown envelopes in October and find that they've got tax bills of multiple thousands of pounds. So how does the annual allowance calculate in the first place? It isn't based on your NHS pension contributions. It's based on the growth of your NHS pension benefits, which is called the pension input amount. And the pension input amount is simply a formula which the government uses, and it's not rocket science. You have a closing value of your pension benefits at the end of the year, which is simply your annual money multiplied by 16 plus a lump sum if it's relevant. If you've only ever been in the 2015 scheme, it wouldn't have the lump sum. It would just be NHS pension times 16. So that's the closing value. And then they take the opening value at the start of the year in order to get the pension input amount for the year. But if it's a year where there's been particularly high inflation, it wouldn't be fair not to account for that inflation, because the inflation means that the growth is inflated as well. So it wouldn't be fair to tax you heavily on something which wasn't a real growth benefit. It was just exaggerated by inflation. So for the opening value, they increase the opening value by whatever the amount of inflation was relevant to that particular year. And you take the opening value from the closing value, and that gives you your pension input amount. And if it goes over a certain amount, which is £60,000 at the moment, then you get a tax bill. I've had doctors with very significant tax bills of £50,000 or £100,000 and very significant worries. But let's have a look at an example and see if we can take some of the worry out of it. So this is a true example of a client of mine. So his management responsibility increased his pay by 15,000 to 130,000. A good thing. He sees on his salary slip every month that he's paying in £18,800 in order to get his pension benefit. And he's prepared to do that, and he's happy with that. But all of a sudden, he gets the brown envelope and he has an annual allowance tax charge of £31,000. And this is quite probably where the saying paying to go to work comes from, because yes, his pay has gone up by £15,000, great, but he's actually being charged £31,000 because his pension has suddenly rocketed. Now, what's happened is these were the opening values of his pension. This is the closing value of his pension after he's benefited from this income increase. And the gross increase is £6,000 in his annual money and £18,000 in his lump sum money. And remember, £6,000 annual money is actually about half what the UK state pension is at the moment. So in just 1 year, he's got an increase to his pension benefits that represents half of what you'd have to save for 35 years to get the UK state pension. So that is an incredible increase for which you'd have to pay over £100,000 into a private pension scheme. But he's got this massive tax bill of 31,000. Nobody pays the tax bill from their back pocket. You pay it by scheme pays. All that means is your scheme pays. And a tax bill can be settled by a reduction in your pension scheme of about 1/20th, i.e. 5% of whatever the tax bill is. So in this instance, the tax bill is 31,000 and he reduces that to zero, doesn't have to pay anything out of his back pocket, but he takes a hit on his annual money of £1,295 and his lump sum of 3 times that. But even when you take these figures from this gross figure, you're still left with this massive leap in his pension. So what has that massive leap actually truly cost him? He sees on his salary slip that £18,850 is coming out each year for his pension. However, the true cost to him is not 18,000, it's 8,000, because this figure is deducted from your pay before income tax is charged. So a senior doctor paying 40 or 45% income tax, that comes off this 18,000 figure. And also by deducting the 18,000 from his pay before income tax, it also took this particular person, it reclaimed most of his lost 0% personal allowance, which you lose when you go over 100,000. So the actual true cost was not 18,000, it was 8,000. And for that, he got a benefit of £5,000 extra annuity for life and £15,000 extra lump sum. So if you like, just the extra lump sum paid for in doubled the actual annual cost of getting that benefit. And then he gets 5,000 for life. And if you went to a pension company and asked them to give you a contract that paid you 5,000 annuity and 15,000 lump sum, they would charge you round about £115,000. So for £8,000 true cost, he has got benefits of £115,000. And because he now understands the annual allowance tax charge, he hasn't worried about his £31,000 tax bill because it's all gone away. These benefits here are after that has disappeared because he's taken this scheme pays cut. The other big confusion in the NHS pension scheme is the NHS Pension McCloud remedy. So I'm going to go over this quite quickly because I can see that time's running out. But what happened was the government discriminated against younger doctors by allowing older, more senior doctors who were closer to the usual retirement age to stay in the 95 scheme and forcing younger doctors to move into the 2015 scheme when they brought it in 2015. And in order to remedy this age discrimination, they brought in a scheme whereby for a period of 7 years, 2015 to 2022, you can decide, so it's the doctor that decides, it's not the NHS, you can decide whether you want those benefits from 2015 to 22 to go into what they call the legacy scheme, i.e. the old scheme, or the reformed scheme, i.e. the new scheme, the 2015 scheme. And it isn't anything you need to worry about now. You get to choose at the point that you want to take your retirement benefits. And it's your choice, and you will do it based on a comparison of what's available in each of them. Now, NHS was supposed to be able to produce these comparable statements back in 2023. And I think they're just about coming out now. And I, in my report, have been doing these for quite a long time, and I'll show you in a second. This just reiterates what I've just said. Don't worry about it now. You'll be given the choice to keep remedy period benefits in the legacy scheme or take reform scheme benefits at retirement. So this isn't an NHS document. This is my reports that I've been doing for the last couple of years. And in this report, I show both the legacy scheme choice and the reform scheme choice. So this is the legacy scheme page. And in this column, we've got 95 benefits. In this column, we've got 2015 benefits. He hasn't got any benefits in the 2008 scheme, so that's empty. But in the legacy choice, i.e. for those 7 years, 2015 to 22, he wants them allocated to the 95 scheme. You can see that the annual money that he would get, his annual pension, is 51,000. And in the 2015 scheme, it's a lot less, it's 29,000, because there are only a few years in the 2015 scheme, whereas most of the years are in the 95 scheme. So that's the legacy scheme choice for this particular person. And the summary of the benefits are down here. Dark blue is the standard benefits. Light blue is the benefits if you choose to take the maximum lump sum, which every doctor, in my experience, does. And in this instance, if he does that, he gets a £71,000 pension and the maximum tax-free lump sum of 268,000. His reform scheme choice, so now he's choosing to put those 7 years from 2015 to 22 into the new 2015 scheme and out of the 95 scheme. So just flicking back for a second, on the previous screen, in 95 it was 51 pension and 2015 was 29, so 51 and 29. Now, because he's flicked over the 7 years allocation, 7 years have been taken out of the 95, so it's gone from 51 to 40, and 7 years have gone into the 2015, so it's gone from 29 to 49. And we can see the summary of the benefits has gone, I'll just go back to the previous one so you can remember the figures, 71 and 268, it's now 78 and 268. So there's a difference of £7,000 each year in his annual money. And again, the market value of that is not far off £100,000. That's the difference in the McCloud choices. There are contingent decisions which were made as a result of McCloud. So here's your McCloud period, 2015 to 22. And when doctors started to receive their annual allowance tax bills and misunderstood it and panicked, a lot opted out of the pension scheme, a lot gave up their added years schemes, and a lot flipped to and fro and did the hokey cokey. One of the results of remedying the discrimination is that members can now argue that they would have taken a different course of action if they had known that continued membership of their old scheme was an option. What that means is you can rejoin. Let's say you left in 2016 because you thought it was too expensive and it was costing you too much in tax. You could rejoin, and what would be necessary would be in both your contributions and the employer contributions would need to be paid in retrospectively with interest. But again, it wouldn't be a case of you paying, let's say you were out for 5 years and you wanted to go back in for 5 years, you wouldn't have to pay 5 years at £20,000 employee contribution. You wouldn't have to find £100,000 to go in straight away. That would be funded by your scheme pays as well. So let's say £100,000 was owed, you would pay that by a 5,000 decrease in pension. But once that 5,000 decrease was taken off the 5 years extra that you would earn as pension, you would still be massively better off. So those things can be restored. And this point is very, very key, because with the 95 scheme, it all depends on your final pay. And that final pay link gets broken after 5 years. So if you've been out of the NHS pension scheme for 5 years, let's say you left in 2017 and you were earning £60,000, that £60,000 would be multiplied by all your years of service. If you had left the scheme for more than 5 years, your final pensionable pay is halted at the year that you left, so it would stay at £60,000. But let's say now you've gone through several pay scale promotions and you're on £100,000, it would be £100,000 at the point of your retirement, which would be multiplied by all your years of service, not the £60,000. So that is a really key thing for anybody who's completely opted out and opted out for more than 5 years. I've got about 4 minutes left and I've got 3 slides. So quickly, I got a freedom of information disclosure from NHS, which showed that there are 15,095 scheme members who've reached the normal pension age of 60, at which they could claim all their benefits with no reduction, and they haven't claimed them. Now, the average pension annual money of a senior doctor that I see is around £50,000 pension. So if you don't use it, you lose it. So £50,000 has been lost on average by 15,000 people each year, that which is £750 million. So it is completely illogical to do anything with your 95 benefits other than start claiming them as soon as you are 60. I've actually had one client who was 68 and hadn't claimed his 95 benefits, which should have been 60,000 pension annually. So frankly, the poor guy had lost £500,000. But he was a lovely, lovely guy, very committed to his job, and just hadn't taken action. So pretty much the final slide now. This is the question that I get asked about more than anything, early retirement. So let's have a look at how early retirement actually works, because for each year that you retire early, you have your pension cut by 4%. However, you should not think of that cut as, if you imagine your pension benefits as gold coins in a sack and they're up in the attic, the tax man does not send his goblins up into the attic, open the sack and take out 4% of the sack for each year. It's not that at all. You still get to keep 100% of the sack of all your accrued benefits, but they have to be spread over more years because you're retiring early. So in this instance, a £30,000 pension at the normal retirement age of 60 in the 95 scheme would give you £26,500 after tax. If you retire at age 55, that's 5 years of 4% cut. That's 80% of your pension will be paid. So instead of 30,000 gross, you get 24,000 gross, which after tax is 21,715. The difference between these two is £4,800 less each year. But what you have to remember is you're getting paid 5 years early. So the sack is open and it's spread out over the floor for those 5 years. And what you're still getting, you're not getting 26, but you're getting 21. You're getting it for 5 extra years, which is £108,000. So you wouldn't be better off until you were nearly 80. It would take 22.5 years. And I've spoken to a lot of doctors who when they realise this calculation, they've decided to retire a bit earlier. And if you're going to do it, be aware that the age rises from 55 to 57 in less than 2 years' time. So if you're wanting to retire at age 55, you have to be aged 55 by April the 5th, 2028, or on the day after, you'll have to be 57. So thank you very much indeed. That is the end of my presentation. And I will just reiterate what Imad said at the start, which is I am happy to do a 30-minute free consultation with anybody who would like further explanation of their pension, or indeed any other financial advice, because I advise across the financial spectrum, investments, insurance, mortgages, etc., inheritance tax. And these are the contact details which will be left on the screen for a few minutes until Imad closes the session. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. We've got a question in the chat, and I know we've got somebody with their hand up. Faisal, I'm going to ask you to type your question in the chat, please.
Sorry, I can't chat. I can't type anything in the chat. I'm not sure what's the technical issue with that.
Okay. Please go ahead then. We'll see if we can get your question answered.
Right. Thank you very much, Andrew, for the very informative talk. I've got two questions very quickly. One is, could you do extra contributions to your NHS pension, and is it a wise choice to do so? And the second question is, could you retrospectively contribute to your pension scheme? What I mean by that is, if you've left the pension scheme earlier and you've rejoined, could you contribute towards the years left by?
The answer to both is yes. And I hope that I've illustrated this evening just how good the pension scheme is. It's better than any other pension scheme in the country. And certainly, if I was employed in the NHS, I would be buying additional pension in the pension scheme. You can buy it in blocks of £250 up to about, I think it's about £7,600, and you can pay for it either in one lump sum, or you can pay for it out of your salary with your normal pension contributions over whatever period of time you want to. Now, if you do it, it isn't as generous as the standard pension scheme, because there isn't an employer element to it. So you don't get that huge 23.7% employer contribution. It's just your employee contribution which counts towards the pension. But it's still, in my opinion, a very good benefit because of the guaranteed element. It's not like paying extra money into a private defined contribution scheme and hoping that the investment works out and getting something at the end. You are getting a pension that is linked to your pay. And if you are a senior consultant, with quite a few years service, then the formula works out as quite generous. And in terms of the second question, that was dealt with on my slide about McCloud contingent decisions. So lots of people left for primarily for tax reasons during that period, 2015 to 22, and because the government discriminated vis-a-vis the scheme, i.e. they did something which legally was not correct and they have to correct it, it means that you don't actually, let's say you left the pension scheme because, well, you don't have to have a huge amount of evidence or argue your case if you left the pension scheme. Just the mere fact that you left the pension scheme and opted out during those particular 7 years when the remedy period ran, 2015 to 2022, you can say, well, I opted out because you illegally discriminated against me and I want to opt back in. And as I said before, it would involve all the relevant payments to be made that should have been made over the period that you weren't in. But it's not that you have to find that money from your back pocket. You can do it vis-a-vis your own pension scheme and still be considerably better off. And if you're in a position where you've been out of the pension scheme for more than 5 years, my guess is you'd be very, very much better off by having your final salary link restored, because over the period that you've been out, no doubt your final salary will be a lot higher now than it was when you left.
Thank you, Andrew. There's a question that came quite at the start of your presentation, and that was, could you explain what inflation-linked means, or what you mean by inflation-linked?
What I mean by inflation-linked is each year that your benefits are accrued and each year that your benefits are paid when you actually get your pension, let's say your benefits were £50,000, but in that year inflation was 3%, then the actual value of that benefit at the end of the year, it would not buy you £50,000 worth of goods. It would buy you 95% of £50,000 because those goods were 3% more expensive. So in order to compensate you for that, the pension scheme adds 3% to the value of your pension. And in fact, it adds more than that. It adds whatever the inflation rate is plus 1.5%. So it's an incredible benefit. And if you weren't in the NHS pension scheme, and like for instance, I've just done an annuity for somebody in a private pension scheme, and they had choices of a basic annuity, a basic annual amount, or a basic annual amount which increased every year with whatever the inflation rate was, and the difference in cost between the two is quite considerable. but you don't bear that cost in the NHS pension. It's automatically there in your scheme.
No, thank you very much, Andy. There's a couple of questions in there which I think are a little bit more specific to people's own circumstances. And so Nitin and Tariq, I'm going to suggest that you get in touch with Jonathan and have that discussion with Andrew in your offered free financial consultation. Andrew, thank you very much for your time today, and I hope that everybody's benefited from today's session. I will bring it to a close for today, but our promise from BIPEPA stands that these sessions will continue and there will be another webinar. It will be the first Thursday of next month, so it will be the same time on the 2nd of July. With that, I will hand back to our host, Dr. Asim Ijaz, for the final concluding remarks before we end today's session. Thank you once again, Andy.
Thanks, Imad.
Oh, thank you, Andy, for a very useful session, and thank you, Imad, for the moderating this session. I think, as Imad already mentioned, that it will be the first of our regular series of BIPEPA monthly webinars, and we look forward to bring you more session in the coming month on leadership, career development, portfolio pathway, governance, well-being, and some clinical selected topics. And thank you again for your support. We hope to see you all at our next webinar. Have a great evening and good night.
Thank you.